Welcome to the Social Yet Distance Pod Collective. It's me, Jack. Today we're highlighting an important event that's making waves in Idaho, one that's drawing national attention. Former congressional candidate and current Idaho Senate candidate Joe Evans, a veteran and advocate for responsible policy reform, will be joining me tonight. We're speaking about the Entheo Society of Idaho for a transformative evening exploring the future of plant medicine. It's going to be on Sunday, February 22nd from 6 to 8:30 p.m. The Entheo Society is hosting a plant medicine educational event. It's in Boise at 2603 West Eastover Terrace. The gathering brings together doctors, lawyers, veterans, Indigenous leaders, and advocates, all sharing knowledge about the medical, legal, and spiritual dimensions of psychedelics and plant medicine. It's an opportunity to learn from the leading voices who are helping to reshape healthcare, consciousness, and policy in one of the country's most unexpected places, Idaho. It'll be a fun time, too, with live blues and reggae music, hors d'oeuvres, and a cash bar. And it's going to be a perfect setting to connect, learn, and grow with Idaho's expanding plant medicine community. To learn more, visit entheosociety.net. You'll also find links in the video description, including details from our supporters at Bloom Hemp and Holistic Caring, with product information and programs designed to make plant-based wellness much more accessible and beneficial. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And let's talk with Joe Evans, Idaho's next senator. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Social Yet Distance Pod Collective. And I'm here right now with Joe Evans, who is a congressman, ex-congressman, and now currently running for Senate in the state of Idaho. And why we're here is we're talking about a festival that's coming up on the 22nd, where Joe's going to be speaking, related to plant medicine, psychedelics, and the legal environment there in Idaho. And that's going to be called the Idaho Plant Medicine Festival educational event. And it's on the 22nd of February at 6 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you guys will all check in the details, there's a description of the video. There'll be all the information and links and what you need to know about that event. And of course, we'll include it in the video itself as well. So please take the time. And if you're in Idaho, go see us and get your educational level lifted a little bit more in the area of field and of plant medicine and psychedelics and that kind of thing. It's a world of healing out there that we are not tapped into the way we should. And I'll let Joe talk a little bit more about that. But welcome, Joe. I'm glad you're here. And I hope that we can do a positive thing here tonight.
Absolutely. So thanks for the intro, Jack. Really glad to be here. However, I have not actually served in Congress yet. I haven't served in public office. I'm a military veteran, U.S. Army. I did 3 tours in Afghanistan, tour in Iraq, the Philippines, and Korea. So I understand the ideas of public service, at least from the military perspective, but I have yet to actually sit in office for the people here in the United States in any capacity, or even for the people in the state of Idaho in any capacity just yet. But I am running for U.S. Senate right now. And some of this is one of my key aspects of my platform. But what we have is an event coming up February 22nd, as you mentioned. Now, this is a plant medicine sort of town hall. So we got some 6+ speakers that'll be talking on a number of different issues, everything from cannabis activism to ibogaine, ketamine, ayahuasca, psilocybin as well. So we'll be talking about all the natural medicines that are coming out right now that are still criminal in most of the states here in the United States, but we want to be able to see them actually legalized, have a system put in place for right to try so that we can get these trials on, moving forward to be able to take care of our patients, our people in need, and actually work on healing people, who are suffering from TBI, PTSD, moral injury, and so many other things that we find, these plant medicines work for.
Right, right. Being in and around the field too, almost daily, there's some new study that backs up everything we've been saying for years.
Oh, yeah.
And, depression, there's a new study that came out related to children in the UK. So every single day is something different, and it's really nice to see the legislative people or politically minded people be paying attention to that and actually working for the people and making sure that they get what they need.
Yeah, now some of the things is we've seen ibogaine legislation come out of Texas and Missouri already. And of course, over the last 20 years, we've watched cannabis become legal in most of the states. I think we still have about five outliers right now, one of which does happen to be Idaho, who
Mhm.
doesn't even have a medical program for cannabis just
Wow.
yet. But we're seeing more inroads with regards to cannabis and several other uh, medications that we use. We see ketamine being used for drug withdrawals. We have several advocates for getting ibogaine, into that particular methodology, getting the ibogaine protocols for uh, addiction, TBI, PTSD, so we can help people recover from those faster, as well as what we've been experiencing with psilocybin as far as being able to rebuild and restructure identity stacks for so many people.
Well, and there's so many aspects of, I hesitate to use the word industry, but over the course of time, I mean, I ran a halfway house for alcoholics and addicts in the late 90s, and I served a pretty wide variety of veterans because of the fact they didn't have any place to go, and the VA wasn't paying for them.
Yeah.
So they had a place to go and recover. But the issue was, I found I had very little success with that population because they weren't getting the attention they needed with the other aspects of their life. Yes, they were learning how to recover. Yes, they were learning how to live in a community, all those, how to live and work, those kind of skills. But when it comes to the internal work that doctors and professionals in that arena just didn't exist at that point. And so I had very little success with the VA population. They were in and out all the time because of that exact same reason. They just couldn't get what they needed. And that's insane in this country.
Yeah, and that's one of those things we continue to see develop. We got lots of plans out there for addiction recovery. Whether heroin, we got methadone clinics, we have ketamine clinics. What we do not have in any significant way right now is a treatment, that is actually usable in the United States
Right.
that properly addresses post traumatic stress injuries, traumatic brain injuries, but we're starting to see this develop in the realm of third gen medicine. We're able to look at historical medicine, plant medicines, that were phased out with the Rockefeller medicine introductions in 1918 and beyond. Uh,
Right.
you know, but we're getting back to plant medicines that actually heal that trauma, that help people recover from that trauma. And this is something that we've never really been able to approach because there's never been a good scientific method using the full scope of available resources for treating post traumatic stress injuries and traumatic brain injuries. Ever since 1920, we've been pushing hardcore on the monomolecular medications that are being created through pharmaceutical industries. You see the Rockefeller medicine that's been so dominant for over 100 years now, finally being pushed to the back burner in favor of living medicine. Here in the United States, PharmaCorp still runs things, but we're seeing the advantage of studies coming out of other nations. Mexico has been a
Right.
front runner in studies for so many things, including ibogaine research and focused on veteran recovery.
Right.
There's a number of clinics down there right now that specifically attend to veteran populations. Special operations operators over the years have been going down there in order to get treatments that they cannot get here in the United States.
Right.
Operation Within is one that specifically works with our special forces operations here in an environment that allows them to legally access that medication, that medicine, without putting them in jeopardy of their career, their retirement plans, and several other things. Now, true, there's some funny stuff going on, but at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at with regards to that. Is all of our research right now for all of these level one, all these schedule one drugs, is coming from outside of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do legal research on cannabis here in the state of Idaho. We can't do legal research on ibogaine, here in the United States. We cannot do legal research here on psilocybin. We have this problem with so many Schedule One drugs that have not been properly tested. They were criminalized. They were put on Schedule One without any research being put into them in the first place. So it's like here we have all of these living medicines that we do not have access to. We cannot get the resources to without leaving the United States in order to participate in these trials.
Right.
And we see more and more of this coming about. One of the things that we've been looking at is going to Schedule 3 for cannabis. Not because we actually wanted it Schedule 3, but at Schedule 3, we can at least do the research on it finally.
Right.
And our legislators will start accepting the research because it's done here in the US,
Right.
as opposed to the research that's being done in these facilities in Mexico, in Africa, in Brazil.
Right.
We'll actually be able to do them here in the US under a scientific standard that the United States Congress will actually appreciate and accept, and that we can move forward with in the medical schools.
Right. Well, and ever since the Rockefeller days, like you say, it's all been about big pharma at that point,
Oh, yeah.
and getting bigger and bigger, and less people being served by whatever it is that they're creating in their little labs over there. But I could tell you some tales about a guy that worked for Merck, but I won't. CIA probably wouldn't like it. But but then at the tail end of that whole process, you end up with a system that has made it so illegal that no matter what your situation is, you're going to end up in jail, you know.
Yeah.
And so
You know,
there's no care, there's no help. It's a punitive thing. The laws have become a punitive thing, and I understand why it might have been that way in 1939. It was it was an interference with other things that were going on at the time. And you can understand how pharma grew where there would be some resistance. But at a certain point, when the research starts stacking up, you have to like loosen those ties somehow. And I don't know
yeah,
how that happens, you know.
absolutely. Well, and part of that is getting rid of the Schedule One. They're true.
Yeah,
There are drugs on Schedule One that actually need to be criminalized because they
sure,
do not benefit us.
sure.
We've seen that, and we have research on those. Heroin being one.
Hmm.
We have other modifications for pain management other than heroin these days. So
Right,
heroin has become one of those drugs, morphine, one of those drugs where we have more stable substitutes, and those drugs are no longer viable for medicinal practice.
right,
Yet we still have all of these other drugs that continue to be illegal, Schedule One,
right.
cocaine, which I mean, we had that in the Coke in 1918,
Yeah.
and then
Well,
we've slowly
I had
migrated
whatever
into
was left over in the 80s, so it's not shouldn't be a problem anymore. I don't understand.
right. Why is cocaine still criminal? I mean, so many people were doing it in the 80s.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, when we look at what are drugs, and getting away from the idea of using so many of these recreationally, because nobody actually uses drugs recreationally.
Right.
Every time they're using it for a medicinal purpose. They're using it to offset something that they
Right.
feel is wrong with them. Whether they're
And
going into
it's
a
the
social
phrasing
environment.
it's the phrasing that's off.
Yes.
That's not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're treating a specific set of symptoms that are causing a specific discomfort. And if
Yeah.
your endocannabinoid system is balanced, then every other system in your body is getting at least closer to being balanced because your ECS ain't going to balance if everything else is out of whack. And that's where I believe the saving grace is for the industry and for the patient is in the formulations of those things.
Yeah.
Bloom Hemp, the company I affiliated with, and Elizabeth Mack, who you'll meet Wednesday, you know,
Good.
the thing is that their deal is on the formulations.
Yeah.
It's this much of these phytocannabinoids and these versions of these components of the and different levels of CBD and different things. Some has THC, very little, but some does have THC because some people have pain, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
and you want 0.03% THC or do you want somebody doing oxy? So harm
No, we talked
reduction is a
about that.
big part of it too. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing because if nothing else, it broadcasts the point. People are waking up to this anyway, and insurance is such a mess, and the hospitals and healthcare systems are all such a mess that they're looking for alternatives to begin with, you know? So when you're able to supplement your real healthcare with other new things, you start to find
Yeah.
out that it's the system that's poisoning us. It's not necessarily the, the drugs or anything else.
Well, it is the system. Our food's being poisoned. We
Right.
use chemicals on it. You know, uh, petro-based
In South
agriculture,
Georgia, where I lived, it was against the law to buy cottonseed that was not processed with a Roundup.
right?
Against
You
the
know, and
law.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Welcome to Bear Monsanto Alliance right now. Take a look
Exactly.
at what's going on in so many other states. Monsanto has a monopoly on the way um, agriculture is managed. But you step back and you take a look at that, and we feed our cattle soy,
Hmm.
okay, in order to help plump them up.
Hmm.
That soy is Roundup soy. It's genetically modified. It
Right.
wasn't designed for beef, for cattle to be eating.
Right.
It's the grains we eat.
Right.
We look at a number of different things that are in our diet on a regular basis, that they're over chemicals,
Right.
too many chemicals in it, they're over processed. We are losing the nutritional value of our food, and not just the additional things that we use to spice and season, such as hemp seed, hemp heart,
Hmm.
other things that would have been part of our regular diet on a day-to-day basis just because it grew in our backyard and it was edible.
Right.
Being able to interact with this, so if our endocannabinoid receptors, our other receptors that work with different things that
Hmm.
used to be regular things in our environment, these things are systematically being destroyed, systematically being removed from our access. And it's like now we're taking supplements in order to get an appropriate amount of vitamin D.
Hmm.
We need to be taking supplements in order to get the right endocannabinoids,
It's hard to
into
say.
our system. Whether it's through CBD, any of the variations along those lines. So we're losing more and more of the things that helped us
Hmm.
develop our humanity over the last, 10,000 years. These things are no longer in our diet. They're no longer in our system. They're no longer in our environment. And here we are expected to take these monomolecular substitutes that are artificial, synthetic, stick them in our body, and have the same result as the living medicine. So
Exactly.
this is one of those things where looking at things from a next gen medicine, third gen or however you want to phrase it, we need to get back to a living medicine that actually cures us by rebalancing our systems in the context of the environments in which we, developed, in the
Right.
sense of how we became who we are as a race, as humans.
Hmm.
The things that cause us to think, the things that turned us from, the more animalistic instincts of survival into actually thinking human beings.
Right.
You One of those things that I see on a regular basis is, the little things about, a monkey on shrooms, 10,000 years ago, and how they eventually, yeah, it's cute, it's corny, but it's one of those things is how did we get into being this intellectual, large brain, forward brain thinking organism without a lot of these natural medicines that we grew up that we adapted to and introduced into our genomes as we were developing. So to turn around and take all of those things out that were once good for us and expect us to remain whole, or keep it, and expect us to maintain the integrity of our mind, body, and soul
Hmm.
is counterintuitive. Now, what we've run into the problem with in trying to bring those things back into our lives is the fact that after 10,000, after 100 years, we've forgotten the balance.
Right.
We've forgotten the ability to maintain that zone.
Our bodies have forgotten.
Yes.
I mean,
So
it's
now,
it's not just an intellectual thing. Our bodies have forgotten.
yeah, we've forgotten it on a cellular level, our ability to reintroduce those things that help us become healthy again.
Right.
Reintroduce the terpenes, the endocannabinoids, the CBD oils, the various other things that we use for helping with recovery, whether it's ketamine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine.
Right.
Those things that help us do the emotional, physical, psychological resets so that we can heal trauma. We no longer have the knowledge
Mhm.
on a tribal level. We have to go seeking experts, and the experts these days are so few, and they've had to go through the trial and error on very small groups. So it's like some of them were able to find the right balance early, so fewer people were injured.
Right.
While we still have the same problem with some people are still, experimenting.
Mhm.
But it's like we need to bring back those protocols. And in order to bring back those protocols, we need to decriminalize it so we can actually do the research and learn what it is we're doing with these medicines all over again.
Let's find out what the results really are. And I noticed in the paperwork or the literature about the event itself that you mentioned Indigenous people were
Yeah.
going to be a part of the event, and I think that a personal opinion would be that that's the place to go. I mean,
Well, and
as
yeah,
long
there
as
is.
they still have the ancestral knowledge, all the answers are there, man.
Yeah, and in a sense, it is, yes, because we're all human.
Right.
But at the same time, Mary Jane Oatman, great woman, love her activism. She's very knowledgeable. She's been working with THC here in the state of Idaho with the Nez Perce tribes, since, her family has been doing it since well before she was born. Um, trying to get cannabis as part of religious practices as well
Mhm.
as just native industry and bring it back to the realm of the tribe. Um, but one of the things that we look at when we're dealing with natural medicines is the fact that we as Americans have a large variety of heritages,
Yeah,
right? So
right,
it's like no one heritage actually reacts to a lot of these things in the same way,
right,
because my ancestral, you know, wasn't based off of cannabis grown in North America or the
right,
psilocybin in North America. My heritage comes from Germany and the Ukraine and England, Britain, the British Isles. There's other people who have come in from Africa. We have a large number of immigrants who are coming in from other countries, the Middle East, Asia, and to expect everyone from a different culture, from a different genetic background to have the same reaction
hmm.
is kind of ridiculous on the face of it, simply because
There
our,
is that point, but the
yeah,
reality is in that answer is we got to get back to what the true science is too. It's,
yeah,
and know what those results are. And without some sort of intervention at this point, we may never know. Because,
exactly.
I mean, the same farms that I'm talking about, locked into buying Roundup seeds, you know who owns them now? Gold Kissed, most of them. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
they've come in and bought most of the farms, and it's one big consolidated Gold Kiss town now.
right,
All the farmers I knew, they still tend the property, but they don't get any money from it. They get paid by Gold Kissed.
right. They're on salary now. They're no
Yeah.
longer actually farmers. They're no longer deciding, playing the game of roulette with, which crops are we going to grow
Right.
this year.
Well,
They,
and they still have to do things like pay for their own John Deere maintenance, which is that's another
right.
story.
Yeah, and there is that. And that's one of the problems we have with modern agriculture, especially when Monsanto started going into that whole land grab scenario of, oh, you have, our seeds on your property and we're going to sue you for your property and it's like, well, no, man, you polluted my fields with your crap.
Right.
It
And I paid you to do
yeah,
it.
it took them like 20 years before they finally started using that approach in dealing with the Monsanto farms that were causing wind drift to blow seeds over
Mhm.
onto organic properties.
Right.
You know, so we're seeing some justice come back around with regards to agricultural justice here versus the corporate entities, but at the same time we still continue to lose simply because we do not have proper safeguards in guide rails for our agricultural industries.
Right.
Our farmers literally are going under while we subsidize corporate farms.
Hmm.
How do you justify subsidizing corporate farms while family farms go under in a world where we know that the processing that's done on the corporate farms is just poisoning the people who eat the food downstream?
Right.
So we keep getting into this circle of what is right, what is, the best thing for us as humans. A lot of it goes back to, we need to get back to family farms. We need to
Mhm.
get back to the community apothecary, rather than big pharma monomolecular, synthetic science. We need to get back to these ideas of small scale, community based, where we have physicians in our communities that understand what the illnesses are, what the cures are. And we can't do that as long as we're continuing to play, pretend that big pharma is actually interested in us getting healthy.
They're not.
And they've said as much over the last 100 years.
Sure they have. Sure they have. And
Yep.
it's a politician's talking point to give it a different opinion most of the time when in the end there's too much resistance regardless. So
Yeah.
you can be a voice in the darkness, but if you're in the darkness, you nobody sees you, regardless how loud you yell, you know. I just
But
came
right
up
now, an
with that.
awful lot
I'm a
of people are
genius.
starting
Boy.
to look. An awful people are starting to look, and an awful lot of people are starting to see.
Yes.
And there are people that are carrying torches into the darkness now.
Yes.
They
Great
understand what's
analogy.
been happening over the last 100 years, and they're tired of it. They're tired of being sick. They're tired of being tired. They're tired of getting this, of finding out they're suffering from malnutrition on 10,000 calories a day.
Right. Exactly.
How do you not get enough of the right vitamins and minerals? When you're putting down 6,000 calorie, it's all empty calories. There's no nutrition in our food anymore. It's just sugar and fat.
Yeah, I have to work real hard and save my monies to get the stuff that I really need for my body. I mean, I'm not in the best of health, and plant medicine saved my life to a certain degree. And it jump started by creating some balance. It jump started the healing in a lot of different areas that the doctors would tell you, you're just going to die, dude. Sorry, you know. you know,
Right.
or we need to yank this body part, and we'll try to give you another one, or maybe Musk has created one that we've got for you, whatever the case might be. Um, and
Right.
and nothing. The medical interventions I had were very important and necessary. However, the ongoing care was up to me, and that's where I started. It all started because after many 20, probably 25 years of being abstinent from alcohol and very active in the recovery community, I got an idea that I needed to smoke pot for some reason. And once I did, it started balancing my whole endocannabinoid system. I know now, I didn't know it then, you know.
Right.
So, and it's created some balance, and I've dealt with professionals to get it right where it needs to be, and I've gone and educated myself about that. So, I help folks as an addiction counselor, and I can also help people as a healer, I hope, and it's so encouraging to see people like you in a position where you are that, regardless of whatever happens with election or not, your voice is out there, and I'm sure people are listening regardless. And we always need advocates. So I'm really grateful that you've taken this position. Any closing ideas from you?
Well, the big thing is if you're in Idaho, come on in. We got the event. It's scheduled for the 22nd. Uh, we have a lot of speakers uh, talking to different issues. So it's going to be a well-rounded town hall. Um, and it's interesting. I haven't actually talked with Leo to see whether or not she's going to be recording the entire thing for later distribution. But one of our speakers is going to be Dana Beal, who is a huge ibogaine advocate right now. Long history of cannabis activism. And of course, he's about to spend about 9 months in an Idaho jail for trying to drive through the state with about 50 pounds of cannabis. Uh,
That'll do it.
oh, yeah, that'll do it. Definitely in Idaho.
50,
But he
did
will
you say
also,
50 pounds
yeah, that was about it.
in 9 months? Hey, he got a deal.
He got over easy. Now, admittedly, that's, 9 months left on time served. So he spent about 3 months time served, 9 more months left to go. Um, Still going to be a felony, but because of the time served, he's able to do it in a county jail. Um, and this comes after extensive work on a plea bargain, but he'll be speaking at this event before he heads on over to Twin Falls, Gooding County to, spend the next 9 months with their hospitality. Um, but we will have, in addition to him, other Ibogaine advocates, several cannabis activists, with a long history of activism in Oregon and other states. Dr. Medford, believe, will actually be one of them speaking. You got the flyer. You'll
Yeah.
be able to put it up and say,
You'll be talking in the final version of this. You'll be talking, and the flyer will be right there.
right. So it's going to be a full spectrum event. There's no reason for us to leave anything out because this is about plant medicine,
Hmm.
and the activism that comes with it. All the plants, all the time, because we are focused on living medicine long term and what
Right.
that represents for psychedelics in the community and in healing and in medicine. So absolutely, if you're in the Idaho area, come on by, visit. You and I are going to be talking again in a couple of days, a little bit more in depth about your activism as well as your mentors. So we'll be able to talk more about what's going on with Idaho as far as legalization,
Hmm.
and again, those are things that we'll be talking about at the event as well.
Right.
But this is going to be a huge event for the state of Idaho. It's going to be the first time we've really had anything that's been this full spectrum for living medicines, for plant medicines here in the state. And we're looking forward to what it means to the community, what we're looking at with regards to legalization, as well as other things that are coming up here over the next month, in our own state legislature.
It's exciting stuff, man. And I'll give you props on the use of the word full spectrum because I know that's been an issue lately in some places.
Right, full spectrum, the entourage effect. Let's actually get there and do the right things with the entirety of the medicine rather than trying to slice and dice out chunks.
Exactly. And let's move a little bit away from hard-lined abstinence to a harm reduction model that's going to give people the opportunity to grow within their own recovery based on the tools that they need.
Yeah.
Whether they have anything to do with the festival that you'll be speaking at or not. It could be anything else. It could be, mental health counseling. It could be group therapy. It could be whatever. Um,
Well, the big thing is, and we talk about this all the time, is the ability to actually remove the stigma so that
right,
we can talk about what we're going through with our physician, with our psychiatrist. They can monitor our usage, and tell us when we're overextending ourselves or abusing the medicine in a way that is counterproductive to our recovery and our healing. As long as the only choice we have with a lot of these medicines is self medication,
sure it is.
we aren't truly doing harm reduction.
Right,
We aren't doing healing.
right.
All
I've
we're
just
doing is,
recently gotten involved with a group
yeah,
called Cali Sober, and as the name implies, it supports the use of additional tools in your toolkit that you might need.
yeah,
Whereas the AA might judge you harshly for having a relapse. That's not the
mhm,
way they do shit. And we like it like that because that keeps people in the rooms and moving to, in their recovery. And at some point, they'll address and have the tools available to address the other things like whether they're taking CBD or whether they're doing breathing exercises or whether they've got a local group that they're meeting with or whatever the case is. And the community is growing to support each other as they do that. And being in that field for quite some time, it's kind of a miracle to see it. Because
yeah.
I think of my own experience, had that been an option in my own closed mind, as well
Mhm.
as the recovery community at that point, I think a lot more people would have been helped. I really
Well,
do.
I think one of the problems that a lot of us have with regards to self medication as well as abuse of certain, substances is that we relapse into coping mechanisms
Right.
because we don't have the right coping skills.
Right.
Where as long as we are integrated with the medical community, working with our physician, working with our psychiatrist, working with people who know what we're doing, okay, we can practice and develop the coping skills,
Hmm.
even though we are at the moment dependent upon a coping mechanism until
Right.
we learn those skills. It's like training wheels.
Exactly. Exactly like that. And I'm seeing it work a lot faster and a lot better than I used to. Um, and I very rarely even go to an out of the house meeting. I do all my stuff online with them because it works.
Yeah,
So, and it's that open mind change the paradigm view that's made that difference, I think, for them and for me, because that closed-mindedness that I operated under as a counselor and as an addict, it just it could go so far. But if I wasn't as a patient, if I wasn't addressing the medical, physical, spiritual, emotional, all the components that made me me, including the things in my past that blocked me off from happiness,
right.
that I can scrape those things out of the way. And then I've got something, a new platform to build on with these other tools that give me the support that I was unable to achieve on my own. And working that process for me is what gives you that and repeating it
Absolutely.
until you freaking get it. So
Hmm.
it's harm reduction in that capacity because there's no judgment regardless of what the outcome is right this minute. Just keep
Yeah,
going. And
yeah,
I just think of the vets that I served, and one guy in particular, I just know if he had had that open mindedness around him, he probably would have done a lot better than he did. And in the end, it was a sad story. And but it's a sad system he was coming from too. So
and that's fair. But again, this is one of those things we've had decades, if not a century now, to learn and adapt to an awful lot of this and
mhm,
understand how the training wheels work as we continue to build that base, as we continue to excavate away all of the rubble that's on the bedrock so we
right,
can rebuild ourselves, rebuild our identities, you know, and recreate, heal our body, mind, and spirit, all in
mhm,
the same time so that we continue to shape and build a stronger self, you know, as we go.
right,
And being able to talk about people about how we use the training wheels
mhm,
while we're doing that excavation, getting down to bedrock so we can rebuild again, you
right.
know,
All I
can't
can
do.
tell you, brother, we could
Yeah.
use a senator here in Florida. I
Well,
think
thank
you're
you for
right
the
on track,
confidence
man.
there, Jack.
And I think we agreed yesterday when we were talking that, both of us could probably talk all day long about this stuff because
Oh,
it
yeah,
is. I mean,
absolutely.
it's heartwarming to have your hands in the building of things and in the saving of people and in the fixing of a broken system and just doing what you can do with the next breath is extremely important. And I can't always breathe on my own. So it's great to have people in my back pocket like you. And seriously, bro, you can come sleep on my floor if you want to run for senator.
Sounds great, Jack.
I've had a
Um,
great time and I appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. Please take the time to like, subscribe, and send me as much money as you possibly can afford. And then when you're done doing that, you'll check the notes in the description for links to everything Joe Evans, including how to donate and find out much more about him and the event, and also all of my links and anything that might be pertinent there as well as a recap of kind of what we talked about here. So thank you for being here. Please come back next week. Joe and I will be back together with Elizabeth Mack from Bloom Hemp on Wednesday, and we probably will release that on Thursday of this coming week. So thanks, everybody. We appreciate you being here. And with that, I'm going to say good night.